What's going on, everybody? Today we're going to talk about the lipless. The lipless. The first thing that we're going to get into is rod selection. This particular one is a Dobyns Champion rod. This is a 7-foot, medium heavy, moderate fast. So it has a moderate fast taper to it. This is something that I will use more so on the bank with the lipless, because if I'm bank fishing, I'm going to be using one rod for multiple different things. So a moderate fast works for your top waters, your lipless. You could throw a jerkbait on it if you wanted to, and it's a little bit more general purpose, but definitely a treble hook rod. The reason why you want that moderate taper is so that the rod has a more parabolic bend to it, and that it helps keep those treble hooks pinned a lot better than it would with like a fast or an extra fast rod. The other one I have here is new to me, but it is quickly becoming my favorite treble hook rod. This is a Shimano SLX that I picked up from American Legacy Fishing. They had like a buy one get one deal on this, so it cost me 50 bucks for this rod, and then I bought a spinning rod as well. Fantastic deal on that. But this is the 7'4" fiberglass rod. This is a moderate rod. You can see how thick this thing is. Look at how thick this is compared to this one. All right, so the glass rods are definitely much thicker, and this is the first glass rod I've ever bought. I started not really liking it when I first used it. You can't feel a whole lot, and you're not really sure what's going on. It's hard to clear the bait. You have to really reel down and throw it to be able to clear the grass off your bait. All things said, it is my favorite lipless rod for sure. Especially when it gets to like the 3/4 ounce, because man, it just loads up, and I'll show it in some videos here. When it loads up and you hook that fish, that sucker is pinned. The amount of fish I've lost on this rod is negligible at best. Maybe it definitely in the single digits out of 100 or so fish I've caught on it. And I think that has a lot to do with that moderate action rod, that you get that full loading. There's also another part of having a moderate rod when it comes to clearing grass. If you can imagine it like a slingshot. So this moderate rod is going to pull back when you get grass on it. And when you let it go, it's going to let that bait accelerate away from the grass when it comes out of it. Whereas if you have a fast rod, that's more of like a gunshot, right? You're going to load up in that grass, and when it comes loose, it's gone 10 feet once it rips loose from that grass. So there's some difference there. I've caught a lot of fish lately, and I load up in the grass and I'll pop it, and as that bait is coming out of the grass and picking up speed again, the fish hit it. So I think there's something to be said for that. So I'm going to jump in here with this one, and it's going to be a good example of that. I'm going to clear some grass here, nothing, and I'm going to do it again, and boom, there's a fish on. Fish is kind of barely hooked, right? It's jumping around. That rod is doing a great job of keeping that fish pinned, and it's in the boat. That's definitely something I'm going to try on my chatterbaits as well, is when you're ripping grass, letting the rod load up a little bit and let the bait accelerate rather than just rip away from it is definitely a huge difference there. So that's the rod. The reel, anything 6-7 to 1 is good. I tend to fish them very fast, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. So 6 to 7 to 1, this is an Abu Garcia Revo SX. I'll use it with my Corrado 200, Shimano SLX 150, whatever. 6 to 7 to 1 ratio reel, no problem. This particular one's on straight 12-pound fluorocarbon, mostly because I am using it on deep diving crankbaits as well as liplesses as well. So the 12-pound lets me get pretty deep. I've had no problems keeping fish hooked up. You can only pull so hard with treble hook baits before you start having problems. So 12-pound, no problem for me. As far as the retrieves go, I think that's one of the biggest things on a lipless. You can cast and wind it in and cast and wind it in, and you'll catch some fish. That's how I started throwing a lipless, and I definitely caught a lot of fish doing that. I have caught more fish doing that when I vary the retrieve, and I vary it pretty significantly. 90% of the time lately, I will cast it out, and I'm 1, 2, 3, stop, 1, 2, 3, stop, 1, 2, 3, stop, 1, 2, 3, stop. You're really generating that reaction strike. When those fish see something come up and stop and then take off again, they cannot stand it. And I have done pretty well doing that. The other part of that is when you get it to the boat, make sure, or you get it to the shoreline, make sure you stop that bait. You have to stop the bait, because there's so many times where there's a fish that's just hot on it and you pull it out of the water. And I've had it, I'll see if I have the clip here, I'll show it. Oh man, that scared me. That fish just came
right into the booth.
I have religiously practiced stopping the bait right before I take it out of the water for that very reason. And that goes for a chatterbait, that goes for a spinnerbait, that goes for an A-rig. Whatever it is where you think there's a probability of a fish hunting that bait down, stopping it, give them that extra split second to try and get it before you pull it out of the water. Definitely caught a bunch of fish doing that, and it is a benefit. The other retrieves is, you know, this is a year-round bait. I caught fish on this in December, in July, in August, in November. All year I can go out and catch fish on a lipless. It is a super versatile bait. So like I said, the stop and go retrieve is really what I'm doing in the hot weather. But in the wintertime, you can cast this out there around structure, around hard bottom, and just yo-yo it off the bottom. Let it hit the bottom, pick up your rod, and then let it go back down. Let it go back down. And they will definitely come after it. More of a crawfish pattern than anything, but that can definitely work as well. So try that when things get colder eventually. It's hot today. So that is the retrieves, that's a rod, that's a reel. When to use it, right? So I just said year round. I like throwing it around grass, I like throwing it around cover. It is definitely a bait that I'll kick the trolling motor on 3 and chuck and wind. And I'm covering water just to try and get something going on. If I'm not really finding success fishing hard cover, and I've got a lot of areas in this lake that are just like flats, or they're just kind of featureless, but there's still some fish hanging out there, I will chuck and wind this thing and just cover water, almost reeling it as fast as I can. It's best to fish it with some sort of wind or chop on the water. That's typical reaction bait fishing, right? You want to have that chop. Fish get a little bit more aggressive when you do that. But I've caught fish when it's pretty slick calm. I caught one this morning on it. So it's not an end-all be-all that it has to be windy, but you definitely want to have some weather, some clouds, some wind. If you can, that's just general reaction bait fishing. The baits I like to use, this is just a traditional cotton cordell 1/2 ounce bait. The reason why this one is on today is because I'm throwing it almost up in the dirt and it runs super shallow. It will not draft a whole lot of water when you reel it in, so if you're fishing around high grass and stuff and want to stay out of it a little bit more, this does pretty well at that. My bread and butter when it comes to it is the red eye shad. This is the 3/4 ounce red eye shad, and this time of year it has been just the deal. Whatever it is, it's just now September, and if I look around, the bluegill, the fairly new bluegill, are this size. When it gets colder, I'll switch down to the 1/2 ounce bait, more winter springtime. That just seems to work for me as well. But either way, I've caught hundreds of fish on the 1/2 ounce, and the 3/4 ounce has really been a player for me this year. They also have a 2-tap version, which is like a 2 tungsten. There's 2 tungsten weights in there. It's a little bit more expensive. Let me see if I have 2-tap. Hold on. So I was successful in finding a 2-tap for you. So here's the standard lipless, the red eye shad. Here's the 2-tap, 1 knocker, whatever they call it. So you can definitely hear the difference between the two. I like to use the 2-tap more so in the winter time. Kind of has a more crawfishy sound when I'm hopping this thing off the bottom, hence the crawfish color. There is one thing that on this bait that I cannot stand, and those are the stock hooks. The stock hooks on a striking bait I find are not very good. These are Kevin Van Dam triple grip size 2. So size 2 if you're using the 3/4 ounce bait. If you're using the 1/2 ounce bait, use a size 4. And I highly recommend changing out the hooks on your baits. Some of them come with great hooks, so Mega Bass or some of the others, 13 Fishing has VMC hooks. Something better than these stock striking hooks. I've lost a ton of fish on them regardless of the rod. That's kind of the baits. Colors, sexy shad, red craw, chrome sexy shad, blue and chrome, all good colors, something you can use year round. Not too particular because like I said, it's a super reaction bait. All right, so here's like how I like to think about some of these baits. So let's talk about drawing power. Drawing power for this I think is fairly low. Fish are not going to come a long way to eat your lipless, and that's why I like throwing around cover where I think there's fish make a lot of casts, make long casts, cover water. So I don't think there's a lot of drawing power when it comes to it. When it comes to quality of fish that you catch with a lipless, it's everything. You can catch a 1/2 pounder on it, you can catch a 5 pounder on it. It is not one of those big fish target baits, but I've caught a little bit better quality obviously with the 3/4 ounce bait since it's a little bit bigger profile. But in general, I would say the quality of fish that you catch is an average. It's not a big fish bait, it's not necessarily a small fish bait. Life is good. Quantity of fish, similar story. It's one of those baits that Again, everything will eat, so you can catch a ton of fish on a lipless in a given day. The rate at which you fish is obviously very fast. This is not a jig where you're dragging bottom. You're covering a lot of water with it. You were keeping it moving, and I would say that this is definitely a fast moving bait. If it's definitely a reaction bait, right? We talked about that earlier. Cost of the bait's pretty low. I mean, this one is like $5 or $6. You can definitely spend up to like $15, $18 on like an LV 500 from Lucky Craft or something like that. And so the cost is relatively low. And so I tried to create this chart a little bit over here so you can kind of see where it plays out. As I do other videos about different baits, you can kind of start to compare them about what I think the drawing power, the cost, quality, quantity, all that kind of stuff, how it plays out for different bait. It's something to definitely consider as you're fishing it. Now, if you want to see me catch a few fish on a lipless, check out this video right here.